Good morning.
Thank you, thank you. So we're on the bottom of page Vav Amud Beis, Mishnah. So today also not too much to do, a little bit, but even nothing complicated, I think, and mostly about Truma, the lachas about Truma that we learned also, we know about it already. So the Mishnah has two cases more or less, and the first one is, both cases are the same pattern. We know that by Truma, only a Bas Kohen can eat Truma, wife of a Kohen, and someone was the mother of a Kohen. We had all that already. And the Bas Yisrael not. And of course, it talks about if she was married, could she go back to Bas Kohen that was married to Yisrael, could she go back? So it says if her husband died and she has no children, she can go back to eat the Truma of her father. So here the Mishnah has a case, just to get the case for it, then we'll go into the details. The Bas Yisrael, she first married a Kohen, and she had a son. The husband died, but she still had a son. And then she married a Levi, and she had a son from him. And the husband died, and she married Yisrael, and she had a son from him. So she married first everybody. First she married a Kohen, Abbas Yisrael. First married a Kohen, then a Levi. It's very organized. First she married a Kohen, then a Levi, then Yisrael. She had a child from each one. And all of them died. Of course, she didn't marry two at the same time. So the Kohen died, the Levi died, Yisrael. But she had a child from each one. And then, of course, this case doesn't happen, but just for the drill. And then the sons died. She had three sons. And the sons died also in order. First the Yisrael, then the Levi, then the Kohen. Right. First the last child, then the child before then. That's the case. And the Mishnah tells you in all these cases, I just highlighted it. Yes, she can agree that she got married. This is the Kohen, this is the Levi, this is the Yisrael. In between, each time the husband had died, and she had a son from that husband. Based for love by him and Ben, and the three times, and then at the end, the three children died. First the Yisrael, then the Levi, then the Kohen. And the Mishnah is going to tell you the halachas of eating truma. Not that no one has to feel emotional about it. It didn't happen, but just how they say the halachas, how it comes out. So it starts off. Bas Yisrael, she is the Kohen. She can eat truma. She can eat truma. She's married to a Kohen. That's simple. She can marry. Bas Yisrael married to a Kohen. She can eat truma. Meis for love, bein. Also tochel b'truma. Even if the husband died, but since she has a son who's a Kohen, so the mother can eat truma because of her son. This is the Levi, but she went on to marry a Levi, even though she had a son who's a Kohen, and she was eating truma, but she married a Levi. So the marriage to the Levi overrides the fact that she has a son who's a Kohen. A Levi's wife cannot eat truma, but she could eat meiser. The one is going like a mayor that only meiser is not for everybody; it's only for a Levi. So she still could eat meiser because she's married to a Levi. She can't eat truma anymore. Also talk about meiser. The lachas of meiser to the Levi, some lachas that's a truma to the Kohen. So even if the husband died, if she has a son who's a Levi, she could eat meiser because of her son. But she went on to marry Yisrael. So now that overrides the son. She has two sons. She has a Kohen son, a Levi son, but she's married to Yisrael. So she can't eat anything. Because she's married to Yisrael. If Yisrael died and she has a son who's Yisrael, so still the whole son holds on to her, that the son doesn't allow her to go back to the other sons, so to speak, to align the other sons. She has a son of Kohen, a son of Levi, because she has a son who's Yisrael. That was the last marriage, was a son who was Yisrael, so she's held on to the marriage to the Yisrael because of the son, so she can't eat. Now the children died in reverse order, Meis Benom Yisrael, so now she goes back, she relies on the son who's a Levi, because now once the Yisrael son died, so she can go back to the Levi son and she can eat meiser. Meis benami Levi, tochel b'truma. If the Levi son died, she can go back to the Kohen son and she can eat truma. Meis benami Kohen, then she goes back to her father's house, Bas Yisrael, and she can lo tochel b'truma v'lo b'meiser. She does. Then she goes back to the father's house. That's Yisrael. This is the case of a Bas Yisrael. So that's how it starts. That's how the whole case started. This was a Bas Yisrael.
So it all depends on whether the son is alive. As long as he's alive, she acquires the status of the son.
Yes.
If he dies, it reverts to what was before.
Right. And the Mishnah says, yes, please.
If a Bas Yisrael marries a Kohen and has a daughter, does that count the same as a son?
The daughter's the same as the son, yes.
So if the husband dies, so she eats from the daughter.
Right.
But if the daughter marries Yisrael and she loses, then she can't eat.
I don't think so, no. I don't think so. And then the Mishnah says the same thing over again in the reverse case. Here we'll say the case first, then we'll say what also let's say the case first. It was a Bas Kohen. We'll say her history, then we'll say all the lachas. The Bas Kohen married Yisrael. She also married Yisrael, then a Levi, then a Kohen. After each one died. In between, she had a child from each one. She has 3 children, the Yisrael, the Levi, and the Kohen. And then at the end, all 3 children died. And the reverse order, the Kohen, Levi, the Kohen child, the Levi child, and the Yisrael child. Same case as before, just the opposite. So now we go in order and we analyze it as we go along. Bas Kohen. Here's a case of a Bas Kohen. She married Yisrael. This is the Yisrael. She can't eat truma because she's married to Yisrael. That we know. Meis v'lai menu ben. Also, lo talk about truma. Since even though the husband died, but the son is alive, so that holds her back from going back to her father's home. She can't eat truma because she has a son who's Yisrael. But she went on to marry a Levi. This is the Levi, so she could eat Maisa. She can't eat truma, but she could eat Maisa because she has a husband who's a Levi. And even if he dies, Meis v'lai menu ben. Also talk about Maisa. Even if the Levi husband died, but she has a son who's a Levi, so the son also enables her to eat Maisa. Then she went on to marry a Kohen. This is the Kohen. Now she can eat truma. She has a husband who's a Kohen. Meis v'lai menu ben. Also talk about truma. If the husband died, but she still has a son who's a Kohen, she also could eat truma. And then the children died in reverse order. Meis b'nomi Kohen. So she can't eat truma anymore, and she goes back to the son who's a Levi, and she could eat Maisa. But Meis b'nomi Levi lo tochel b'Maisa. Once the Levi son dies, she can't eat Maisa because she doesn't have a husband or a son like that. And then she can't eat. And she has a Yisrael son, so she can't eat anything. She can't go back to her father's home yet because she has a son who's Yisrael. But Meis b'nomi Yisrael, then she can go back to her father's home, who's a Kohen, the Chazal the Beis Aviyah, then she could go back to eat truma from her father's home. What's that?
It's very sweet. The whole thing is 3 different.
Yeah, the Mishnah gives you the case in order to drill the case of the drill. Not that this case,
It
not
depends
that.
on the father, then about 3 sons from 3 different tribes.
Right.
Each one,
This is a complicated case, but this is Allah that the Bas Kohen, if she has no children, she can go back as her youth and eat from the father's truma. So that's the Mishnah. So it told us that the husband holds on to her, and as long as there's a son, the son is continuing whatever the father was. And if they die, so then they go back to the previous status.
then she can go back to her father.
Right.
Because there's no more son.
Right. So the Gemara starts, and we see here a new thing. We saw that when a husband dies, she goes back. The husband's been feeding her, so when he dies, she goes back to not feeding her. The husband who was her husband. So when he dies, she goes back to her father's home. There's a Kiddush.
Her son who is Cohen. Yeah. But it's a status.
Then if she has no sons from that husband, no children from that husband, she goes back to her previous status. So here the commission had a complicated case. If there's a simple case, she only had one husband and she had a child, or so then when the husband and the child die, she goes back to her father's home. Here's the complicated case that her previous status is not always to go home. Sometimes her previous status is to go to the previous child or the previous husband, and that's what the Mishnah spelled out. So there's a chiddush up here in the Mishnah that not only when her husband dies does she go back, when her child dies, she goes back to the previous status also. That's Meis b'nomi Levi tochel b'truma. Here the case was the first case. She was a Bas Yisrael married to a Kohen and had a child, and then she has a child to Kohen. Then she married a Levi, and she was not allowed to eat truma because of the husband Levi. And then when the husband Levi, and then when the Levi dies, she would be able to eat truma. That's right away at the beginning of the Mishnah.
If there were no children. If there was no son.
The case was she married a Kohen. She could eat truma. She died, but she had a son from him. She still could continue eating truma. And we're jumping to the bottom of the page. Meis b'nomi Levi talk about truma. There was this afterwards. After she had a son as a Kohen, she also had husbands and sons that were not Kohanim, and she wasn't allowed to eat truma all that time. But then the Mishnah at the end, the bottom line, it says Meis b'nomi Levi talk about truma. She can go back. She goes back to eating truma from the son Kohen. She has 3. The husband's died, and she had 3 sons. And then the Yisrael son died, and the Levi son died, and it says she can go back to eat truma. That's the bottom line. And the question is, that's a chiddush, because we only had in the Torah that she can go back to eat the truma of her father. Where do you see she can go back to eat the truma of her son? That she was out of the permission of eating from her son because of her son's a Kohen, because she had other children after that. And now you see if those children died, she does go back to her son, the Kohen also. That needs a proof. So that's what the most question is. Based on Levi, told the Truma, the Hadra Rachel Mishum Bana. She can go back to eat because of her son, the Kohen. How do you know that? It doesn't say openly in the pasuk. It says Ubas Kohen Kisiyam Mano Busha. She can go back to her father's house and has extra bub. Ubas. It could have said Bas Kohen, and it says Ubas. That teaches us this extra halacha that even she can go back to eat because of her son. Not only because of her, not only if her son dies, her husband dies, she can go back to eat because of her father. She can go back to eat because of her son also. We had this a couple of times already that only Rabbi Kiva darshans above and others don't. They say that's the way it talks and it's not enough of a drasha. More answers, I feel the temper and full of ubas you not just the above. The whole word is extra, not only bas ubas, but the whole word ubas is extra. It could have continued without saying, because we knew who we're talking about, so it could have just continued without that word. So therefore, there's room for a drasha. We learn out that just like a woman goes back to eat her father's truma, she also can go back to eat her son's truma that she was eating because of her son, and then she had other sons, and that stopped her. But if those sons died, she can go back to eating from her son.
We need some kind of a. It's not just a good svora that if the son died, we wouldn't know, because then it's once she married somebody that stops her,
Right.
it seems like it could be stopped
Maybe,
forever.
right.
That's what
And you need a pasuk to say that she goes back.
we need a pasuk.
We need a pasuk, right? A drasha. Tana Rabbanan, Keshehi chozeres letruma ve'ena chozeres lechazak b'shok. We had this once upon a time. It says in the side, Samach Chesed Mud Beis, that the halacha that when a woman's husband, the Yisrael, dies without any children, so she goes back to her father's home to eat truma. But here it says, but she doesn't go back to chazak b'shok. Means that the Kohen, besides eating truma, they also have a right to eat kachim kalim and chazak b'shok, and also their daughters also. How does the pasuk? How does it say in Ezra Mukoman, Livneim, Nashayim? So the woman also could eat. But here the halacha is that a woman who married Yisrael, even though he died without children, and she goes back to her father's home to eat truma, but she doesn't have the right to eat chazak b'shok anymore. And that the Gemara wants to know how to eat. And the Gemara said it before. The Gemara says it over here. This is the main sugya, and the Gemara is going to bring many psukim. I think 5 drashas. The Gemara is going to be 5 drashas to learn out this halacha. How do you know that even though she goes back home? Going back home doesn't mean she has to go to the father's home. It means that she has the right to still be part of the father's home, and she can eat truma because she's a bas kohen. But she doesn't go back to eat chazak b'shok once she married Israel. How do you know? How do you know? Because it says hibis rumasa kodashim lo sochel. The mu'min akachim lo tochel. It's talking about that when she marries Israel, she can't eat. And of course, it's that the pasuk means truma, and it says that after the husband dies, she could go back. But there's going to be a drasha, not the pasuk pshat, that truma sakachim she never could eat. And what does truma sakachim mean? Not truma. It means b'mu'uram menakachim lo sochel. That thing which is lifted up, that's called chazak b'shok. The part which is separated from the korban in order to give to the kohen, that she's never allowed to eat. Even if she does go back to her father's house, she never could eat chazak b'shok anymore. That's the first drasha of Chisda. Of Nachman Amar Rabba Baravu, a different drasha. It says Milachem aviyah tochel. She can go back home to eat from the bread of her father. Milachem v'lo kol lechem. The mem. Milachem. She can eat of the bread. It means not all the breads. That means it doesn't mean bread. It means food. That she can eat of the food. It means not all the food. She can eat truma, but she can't eat the kachim. Throughout the chazak b'shok. The Gemara is going to have more drashas, but before it goes further, the Gemara challenges the drasha over here. If it's just a meat to say that she can't eat everything, she's not completely not eating. That she's not completely back to be her father's daughter. Maybe it's coming to tell you that the father cannot be made from the door. Maybe it has nothing to do with this rush of chazak b'shok. Maybe you need this pasuk to tell you that a woman that she married, even if the husband died, she doesn't go back into the jurisdiction of her father to be able to nullify her vows. The halacha is usually that a father could nullify the vows of his daughter until she's a gedola, until she's a bulgaris. I forgot the halacha. And a husband also could. And the other halacha is that once the husband died, so she could. The father doesn't go back to his jurisdiction anymore. He can't be made. I think that's what the Gemara is asking, to say that only some halachas that should go back. And if I didn't look around, it sounds like a good kasha, but the Gemara says that maybe we darshan from here that she's not completely going back to her father, only as far as this truma, but maybe not as far as the Topos and Doran. Amar Rabba Kvar Paska Tanat Ve'Abishmo. We know that already from someplace else. Means the Gemara is answering. You don't need a pasuk for that because we know from someplace else. From where do we know? Tanat Ve'Abishmo. It says in the pasuk that in contrast to a woman who's married, that the husband has the right to nullify her vows, but the vow of a widow or a divorcee, are obligating because no one's there to nullify it. And what
What are you
what
talking about? They're talking about, let's say it's not that,
maybe the boss is not coming to tell you that she doesn't go back to her father's home as far as cause of a shock. Maybe it means she doesn't go back to her father's home as far as his jurisdiction to nullify her vows.
why are you saying it's only talking about eating?
Why cause of a shock? Maybe learn out justice Allah and don't know cause of a shock. So the Gemara says that we know already. And the pasuk is that if a widow or a divorcee, a divorced woman, she makes an eder, so it's binding. It's binding. Right, and the Gemara says it's partial. If there's no husband, then it's of course. What do you need a pasuk for? That she's already out of the father's jurisdiction, she's out of the husband's jurisdiction. So of course nobody's there to nullify it. So of course it's binding. When the son alone is Garsha, but derech, Echani Koreba, base of Via Shelzu or base Bala Shelzu. Have a Lomalacha Chivin Shiasa Mishachas Mishusa'al, Shuvin Yachalaf. It's coming to tell you, even in the case where it's already almost in a suin, that or yesterday suin, that the father gave over the daughter to the husband or to the shluchim of the husband in order for marriage for the suin, and then he died or he divorced her, the husband died or divorced her. So is she considered back to the jurisdiction of her father or not? So it says once she leaves the jurisdiction of the father, she doesn't have any jurisdiction to make her a first daughter. I think the Gemara is saying that this we know already. So this halacha about losing the jurisdiction as far as nether goes, we know already. So we don't need this pasuk. So therefore, right, you don't need this milechem to tell you that. You know that already from an edam or gusha. So therefore, the pasuk of milechem has come to tell you because of a show. So that was also a successful drasha. We had 2 drashas already, and now the Gemara goes on for another 3 drashas. It says bread. The Gemara is not actually that it means bread, and not in contrast to meat. That bread means things that are truma. But the fact that it says bread, it comes to exclude meat. Meat means karbanas. So in karbanas, she doesn't go back to eat. She goes back to eat truma. She doesn't go back to eat karbanas, and she doesn't get chazav v'shot. Another drasha, 4th drasha. Lechem avia means that it's her father's. That means it has to be his monetary property. But kachim doesn't belong to him. Truma belongs to him, but the karbanos don't belong to him. The Gemara says that chazav v'shok, he gave it to the kohen. It doesn't belong to the kohen. It's not his. He can't use it for his money. He can't take mekadosh a woman. He just has the right to eat it. Shulchan gavua kazachu means that Hashem invites him to the table. You can eat from the table of Hashem, but it belongs to Hashem. So it's not called lechem avia. The truma is called the bread of her father. It belongs to him, but the carbon is not. So therefore, the person doesn't give her permission to go back to eat the chazav v'shok.
I'm sorry, lechem hakanui, how do you pronounce it?
Lechem hakanui, which is bought, which is acquired to the father. That's the thing that she's allowed to go back to, but she can't do. But that excludes chazav v'shok, which doesn't belong to the father. He has the right to eat it because he's eating from Hashem's table. Shulchan gavua means Hashem. Yeah. So that's the 4th drasha, and the final drasha is everyone's agreeing to the din. Just the question where you're dashing it from. The Rabba Amar, it says in the pasuk ve'es chazei tenufa ve'shok hatruma tachlu ata uvanacha uvanasach itach. It says this is the din of chazav v'shok that the kohen to give it to his sons and daughters. It says that chazei tenufa, which was waved, and the shok, the breast which was waved, and the shok which was uplifted, you, kohen, and your sons and your daughters may eat with you. It says only when they're with you. So that only when they're with you is coming to say that when she was married, even though she comes back again, that's not called with you. It's only when she's with you completely, means before she got married. So those are the 5 drashas to support the drasha that the Gemara starts under Rabbanan, that even if she goes back, a woman who Bas Kohen that married Yisrael, and she comes back to the father after the husband died without children, so she does not go back to chazav v'shok. Everyone agreed to the din. The question was, we learn out from. We had 5 drashas.
You need all 5?
No, and each one's gonna have to say what to do with the other one. Then what doesn't go into all that? 5 possible drashas.
Can you name those? Arba,
You want to know the names?
Abba Marav. Is that the first one?
Yeah, you want to know the name? The first one is Rav Chizda, Amar Ravina Bar Shila. Second one is Rav Nachman Amar Rabba Bar Avua.
Yeah.
The 3rd one is Rav Safra. The 4th one is Rav Papa, and the 5th one is Rava.
No, Rav, and then what about that?
Where are you? Oh, we didn't do that. You see the 2 dots over there? Second white line.
Your 2 dots.
Yeah. We just finished this again. This again. Amar Rav Adabarav, second white line. Amar Rav Adabarav. Tana, we don't in the Brisa. Kishi choseres lebeis aviyah, choseres lechumah bein choseres lechazav b'shok. So far, that's a review. We just learned that even though she goes back, she doesn't go back to eat chazav b'shok. Her husband, she married Basko and married Yisrael, and he died. She goes back to her father, but she doesn't get chazav b'shok. That we just finished learning with 5 drushes. But the chiddush is now the Brisa continues. Bishvil b'na choseres af lechazav b'shok. Which means that the halach is that she goes back to her son. We said that if she had a son who's a Kohen, and afterwards she got married, she had other husbands and children, they stopped her from eating the truma, even though she had a son who's a Kohen, and they died, she can go back to the son. That was the beginning of the sugya. That's the first thing the Gemara said, that she can go back to eating the truma because of her son. Over there, she does go back to eat the chazav b'shok. The Gemara is going to talk about the drasha, but first the halacha, that even though she doesn't go back, everything's drashas over here. It means you don't say any svara. I can't say any. The Gemara said 5 drashas, but the Gemara is saying all those drashas don't apply to when she goes back and she has a son. If she has a son who's a Kohen, if she's a Bas Kohen, and she's going back to her father's house, then the pasuk says 5 different drashas that she doesn't go back to eat chazav b'shok. But if she's a Bas Yisrael who married a Kohen and she has a son who's a Kohen, even though for a while she was not able to eat because of the son, because she married somebody else, a Levi, a Yisrael, she has children with him in Israel, and then they all died, and she's going back to the son of the Kohen. The son of the Kohen, her son, the Kohen, does give her even chazav b'shok. Rav Mordechai, Rav Mordechai, I think Rav Mordechai was a Talmud of Rav Ashi. I think you always find him as a Talmud of Rav Ashi. Rav Mordechai went to set over this Gemara, this Brisa, to Rav Ashi. So Rav Ashi said, the first Gemara said that the whole way you know that a son, that she goes back to the son, even after she married others and had other children, she goes back to the son again to eat, is only from a riboy that we learned out, similar to what a woman goes back to her father's home, that the Bas Kohen goes back to her father's home after her husband dies. So too, if she had a son who's a Kohen, she also goes back to the son, the Kohen, even though she had other husbands and children. It was a riboy from that first pasuk of Basu Bas, or the whole Bas, but it's only a riboy and the halach of going back to her father. So how could it be stronger than the source? This is only a drasha you learn out from the din of going back to a father to go back to a son. So how could it be stronger? If this halach is that the father's house doesn't give her back chazav b'shok, how could the son? And the Gemara answers, Hasam kasivim meyute, hachalok kasivim meyute. Over there it says that these drushes, these 5 drushes, but here it doesn't say it. So we learn not only the positive, we don't learn out the negative. So she does go back to eat from her son, but you don't have all these miyutim that say that she doesn't go back to chazav b'shok, so she goes back to chazav b'shok even though she lost it temporarily, she goes back to it again. So that's the Gemara's drushes, and that's the halacha, it seems.
Why are all the 5 drushes? I mean, I can't remember them in one shot. How they all strike onto the father?
Because that's what it's talking. That's what the Gemara is. Melachim aviyah tochel. These psukim over there was talking about the father. The psukim were talking about going back to the father.
The 5 drushes are talking about the father.
That's what they're talking
All the
about.
husbands died.
Right.
The latest son was Yisrael, and when he didn't die, Levi died. The 2 sons left are Israel.
No, so the later son holds on to her then. No, so the later son holds on to her and she can't go back to eat. Only if she has later children after the Kohen, she can't go back to that Kohen. The case is that all the children,
With their
right?
father.
All the children died, right?
They continue with the father too.
Right. The son holds on to the father. It means the son's existence, whatever. He's the representation of the father, and the father's still here, the husband, so to speak. So that's the halacha that when a woman goes back to her father's home to eat truma, she doesn't go back to chazav b'shok. But if she had a son who's a Kohen, even though she had left him, so to speak, because she married somebody else and she had children later, but if they died and she goes back to the son, the Kohen, to eat truma, she also could eat chazav b'shok also.
Is it possible to say that's like the shita of Rabbi Yechon? That she's mutter for truma, as mom is the rice and chazav b'shok?
No, nothing to do with that. Nothing to do with the chazav b'shok of.
Saying that she
No, chazav b'shok over there was just a way of saying something different. So that Gemara was a little misleading. It is misleading because when the Gemara contrasts truma and chazav b'shok in our Gemara, everything's daraisa. That Gemara is just another way of saying daraisa. Truma against chazav b'shok is a way of saying truma rabbanan and chazav b'shok, which is daraisa. You can also say truma daraisa. It is misleading. The contrast between truma and chazav b'shok in the different Gemaras means different things. This is daraisa. This is not rabbanan. Over there, the Gemara meant that there's no difference between truma daraisa and chazav b'shok. But that's
I'm saying that the Rabbi Yochanan.
Nothing, no, nothing, nothing. This is the rices over here. The shlokish over there is talking about that, so that's not our sugi. Our sugi is all the rice. It's misleading, but it's not true. We're talking about everything the rice over here. Over there, Rabbi Yochanan is just saying, Chazav V'Shok is another way of saying Truma the rice. It's nothing to do with the inherent difference between Chazav V'Shok and Truma. Over there, the Taka is misleading. But I mean to say it's misleading is the wrong way to say it. It's confusing. Okay, the Gemara continues. This we had already, that the woman who could go back, the Bas Kohen, that goes back to her father's home to eat Truma, even though she was married to Yisrael, but it says she returns to her father's house. But some women can't return. Who's that? If she died, the husband died without children, that's the case. If he has a brother and she's on deck for Yibum, so she can't go back to her father's home. She's meshubit to the family, so she can't go back to eat Truma. And also there's a pasuk bin Ureha that says that if she's pregnant from the husband, she's a Bas Kohen that's pregnant from her husband Yisrael, the husband died, she also can't go back to eat because she's muberes, because she's pregnant. So it's not kinureh. Kinureh means that she's the same as she was. She's not the same as she was before. She wasn't pregnant. Now she's pregnant. So she also cannot go back to eat from the truma of her father.
Is that the end of the verse?
Yes. Oh, no, maybe not. Maybe not. Maybe it goes, maybe continues. Maybe continues until 4 lines from the bottom where there's a parentheses on the screen. Maybe that's as far as it goes. So the Gemara is going to juggle a little bit. So I made a chart. I hope that's going to be helpful. I'll put on the chart and see what happens over here. 1 second. No, I have to put on this. This is a chart that's going to take us to the end of the parak. This is we're going to finish the parak today. Go on to the Mishnah. This is the next couple of sugis. So I hope that'll be helpful. The subject here is what is considered a child. I wrote that in English for convenience. What is considered? I should have written everything also in English, but Yibum, Truma, the rest is pretty easy. What is considered? What's the what is the criteria to be considered a child? It's negate to Yibum. It's negate to Truma. But Yibum, if there's a child, so there's no Yibum. If the deceased husband had a child, there's no Yibum. We have to discuss 3 cases. Is it considered a child as far as Yibum? Also by Truma, that the Allah is that if the woman, you don't see that, you see it over here. The other one is if there's a woman that was a Bas Kohen that was married to Yisrael, that she cannot eat Truma. And if there's a son, even if the husband died, she also cannot eat Truma. What's considered a son for that case? And the Gemara is going to compare Yibum and Truma, what's considered a child. So we just talked about, let's say, Uber, we just talked about if she's pregnant, not born, a child that's not born. The husband died without children, but he left her pregnant. Is there Yibum?
No.
No, he's considered a child.
What do you have?
Check me. What is considered a child? X means not considered a child. Check means it is considered a child.
Yes, there's a child.
There's a child, and therefore there's no Yibum.
Okay.
And a woman who her husband the Yisrael died but left her pregnant, is she considered that she has a child still and she cannot go back to her father's house to eat Truma? It says yes. That's what we just learned. That she can't. The Uber is like a child. That's what we just did. So we just did this middle category.
In terms of eating Truma.
Right. And let's talk about if the woman had a child from a previous husband, min ba'allah harishon.
What is it?
Min ba'allah harishon, from a previous marriage. The woman has a child from a previous marriage. So as far as Yibum, a man married a woman and she has a child from a previous marriage, but he didn't have any children. Is that child enough to stop her from not to do Yibum? Is there mitzvah of Yibum? A woman married, she has 10 children.
Yes.
And
Is that right?
No,
She's not,
because it's not.
it's him.
he doesn't have any children.
To set up the name of
He
his
doesn't
property.
have any children.
That's what I meant.
Okay, that's the, maybe I got confused with the X. X means it's not considered a child for him,
It's
and
not
therefore there is
considered,
Yibum.
He does do you.
Right, there is Yibum
Yes,
because he's not considered,
there is.
the fact that he has children from a previous marriage, it doesn't affect the Yibum. She still has to do Yibum because her husband doesn't have any children.
Mhm.
How about by Truma? Here the case would be that there was a woman that has a child from a previous marriage. She's a Bas Kohen, and she has a child from her husband. She got married a second time. The husband died, and she married a second time, and he died. Could she go back home to eat her father's Truma? She married
child
two,
is
she
a
married,
child, she can't go
she
back.
cannot, she's considered a
It's like
child,
the
she cannot go back, what?
That's the mission.
That says what?
Didn't we say that in the Mishnah? Because she married a Yisrael, and that son is gonna be like the Yisrael. So as long as he's alive, even though she married a Cohen and he died, it's too late. The son is still alive. Yisrael's son is still alive, blocking.
Right, even though it's a previous marriage.
Yeah.
You don't say that, you don't look at the last marriage, and if there's no children from the last marriage, she goes back home again. You don't say that. That if there are any children that she has,
I thought they had
But-
the reverse.
Why
She
did they?
marries a Yisrael, and then she marries a Cohen.
okay, but then when, or make a case of two Israelim, just to make it simple. If
Two
there be two
Yisraelim.
Israelim, she married Israel, married another Israel.
Yeah. Oh,
And
she's a Bas Cohen.
she's a Basco, she wants to go back home to eat
She
Truma.
wants to- Yes.
And but she has children from the previous marriage, she doesn't go back. You don't just say that the last marriage there was no children, she can go back home. You don't say that.
Why do you have
An X and a check.
yeah, I don't. think-
Everything is what is considered a child.
Oh, so you
If an
say-
X means it's not considered a child, to all relevant halachas of Yibum, and a check means it is considered a child to all relevant halachas about Truma,
Yeah, but you can't go back to the father.
because it's considered a child. Yeah, yes, we don't just say, yes,
The one before I don't understand.
what is this one? This one?
Yeah.
That if, this you do understand, you said it, that if a woman has children,
Yeah.
and then she got married a man, and then the second marriage now, he doesn't have any children. He doesn't have any children for any wives. And he died without children. Is there a mitzvah of Yibum? She has 10 children.
Oh,
And she married a
that's
man
what
who hasn't-
I thought she never had children. That's not the case. She can have children.
That's what we're talking about. If the woman has children from a previous marriage, and she married somebody, and now from this marriage, and this man has no children,
And he died.
and he dies, is there Yibum?
So he's saying what? Yes, there, yes, he must.
Yes, because this child is not considered as a child as far as Yibum goes. Means he has to have children. If he doesn't have children, even though she has children, that's not the subject.
So then there is.
So we talk about the 4 cases so far, and now mace. Mace means that at the time of the death of the husband, the child was alive, but then he died afterwards. The child died. At the time of the time that the case of Yibum, a man died, and he had a child, and then the child died. Does she have to go Yibum? So that's a child, and she doesn't do Yibum. No Yibum, because at the time of the death, there was a child, and even if later on he died, you don't say the man has no children. So Hakum Shem Achiv, you don't say that. At the time, how about by Truma? That at the time,
He died, and she goes back to her father's house.
even though at the time of the death there was a child, Basco married Yisrael, and he died, and there was a child.
So at the time that the child's alive, she can't do Truma.
But then when the child dies,
All bets are off, and she goes back.
she
to her
does go back.
father's house.
So that's the child. That's the child.
Okay.
For each, the Gemara is going to say at the end of all this that each one of them has a pasuk. Each one has a
Each one
pasuk.
has a
It's a pasuk for each one
to teach.
to teach us the law by each one. But the Gemara is going to do a lot of juggling. That what would we do without a pasuk? Wouldn't be able to figure it out by ourselves. What would be figured out by ourselves? The Gemara is going to the whole time juggle with Kalvachomers, mixes and matches. What would we have thought? And that's why I need a pasuk.
Okay.
Okay. So we go back to the Gemara. One second, please. Okay. So the Gemara continues. Where are we? Gemara. The Gemara said that a woman who, the Bas Kohen who married Israel and he died, but she was left pregnant. Could she go back? So it says no, she can't go back. But you needed a pasuk for that. And the Gemara is asking the question, why do you need a pasuk? V'alo dinu, uma b'makom shelo asa v'lad min harishon kol v'lad min hasheni l'foshem min ha'yibum asa uber ki yolud makom she'asa v'lad min harishon ki v'lad min hasheni l'posem min hatruma enu din shenasa uber ki yolud. I'll try to get the screen on at the same time as we did sometimes. Maybe it's easier to juggle with both of them on.
Isn't it logical?
Okay, so what is the Gemara doing over here? ומה במקום שלא עשה ולד בן אבישע ולד בן השני לפוטר מן הייבום עשה אובה כולד במקום שעשה ולד בן אבישע. So the Gemara is dealing with this. Let's say the Gemara says it's a pasuk. This is the one we're talking about. Is the muberis, is the uber considered a child as far as truma goes? So the Gemara brought a pasuk. And the Gemara is saying, forget, let's say there's no pasuk. Cover it up. There's no pasuk over here. What would be if there's no pasuk? What would we have said on our own? We would have. Why not make it kal v'chomer? Let's look at this. By which is considered more of a child, by yibum or by truma. So if you put these two boxes over here, so here we see that by truma, it's more of a child than by yibum, because here it's not considered a child. Here it is considered a child. So if by here it's considered, if these three boxes would be givens, and this would be the unknown, can't we make a kal v'chomer that if by yibum, which a previous child is not considered a child, by truma it is. So by uber, which we know already from someplace else, that Uber is considered a child, so can we figure out on our own
That's for sure.
that is
The
considered a
was
child?
separate from
And
the
you don't need a pasuk for that. You wouldn't need a pasuk. Good.
That all comes up to Mina Rishon, or is that just the first step? Isn't it logical?
Isn't it logical that in a place where you don't consider a previous child to be considered a child in order to by
Shelo
Yibum,
said Vlad ben Rishon.
you don't consider a child from a previous husband as a child from the second marriage
Vlad ben
in order to
Kid,
pater from Yibum?
Vlad ben Hashem.
But by Yibum, still you say that the Uber is considered a child. So in the place that you make that by Truma, where you say that the blood from a previous marriage is considered like a blood from the second marriage, as far as Truma, isn't it a kal v'chomer that the Uber is going to be considered a blood? So I think the chart makes it a little bit easier that if you have these three givens, if this is not a blood and this is a blood, so if this is a blood, this is surely a blood. So what do you need a person for that?
And did we end, does it end with Eno Din? Like, why doesn't it say?
Eno
Kal
din
v'chomer?
shenasa uber, isn't it a kal v'chomer? Din means a kal v'chomer.
Yeah.
Isn't it a kal v'chomer shenasa uber kiyolid? That's the question of the
That's the
brisa.
question. Okay.
And the Gemara says no, because we're going to talk about the next one. Let's look at the chart here. The Gemara is going to say, don't forget about this. How about this? You're looking at this, so you're saying, oh, this is the pivot.
Kal v'chomer.
How about this pivot? This pivot says that it's harder to make. That here you see that even something which is considered a vlad by Yibum, but by Truma it's not. So even though you know this, doesn't mean you know this.
Well, I'm sorry, I keep losing. Who's the mace?
Mace means that there was a child at the time of birth and then he died.
Oh, the child died.
The
Yeah,
child
the
died. All these things is a child. All these things the child died. All these things is a child. What is considered a child? From a previous husband, from who's a fetus, and who died.
Uh-huh.
So
So
the
the
Gemara's
child
answer is
that
that you
died
wouldn't be
is
able,
still a child.
that by Yibum it's considered a child, but by Truma it's not considered a child. So even though you know that by Anuba it is considered a child by Yibum, that doesn't necessarily mean you know by Truma either.
So that knocks off the cover.
So it's not going to come. That's the one's answer. That's the price. Hello, Mali Asa Ubay Kiyol ben Yibum, because over there it's easy to be a child. Shabi Asa Mesim Kachayim, that even after he dies, it's still considered like a live child. Nasa Ubay Kiyol ben Truma Shalo Asa Mesim Kachayim, but by Truma Womach, it's not so easy to make it a child. So you need a pasuk. That's why you need a pasuk. Talmud Dama can read about the muberes. So this bottom box, the middle box here, if you want to put a pasuk in, we'd say Kinu Reha. Since it says Kinu Reha, you have to have a pasuk. You wouldn't know it by yourself. That's the first Gemara. Before the
Is the pasuk.
Kinureh is the
pasuk,
person,
yeah.
right? Now, before the Gemara goes further, the Gemara just wants to know. The pasuk says by Truma 2 points. One is that Bezerah Imla, and one is Kinureh. It says that if the woman, her husband, Bas Cohen, married Yisrael, and he died. So one pasuk says if she has children, she doesn't go back. Bezerah Imla, she only goes back without children. And also it says if she's pregnant, she doesn't go back. It says 2 points that the woman, the Bas Cohen, is married to Yisrael, who was married to Yisrael. She doesn't go back if she has a child who's a Yisrael or who's pregnant. Either one. So which one is it? Why does it have to say both of them? Let's say one, whichever one's the bigger chiddush, and learn out the other one. I think what's going to say both of them have a chiddush. You wouldn't be able to learn one from the other. Again, it's simple Gemara. Which if
Or
the
if she were pregnant, then all the more so if she had a child.
okay, and so Gemara's going to say it's far both ways that you wouldn't know one from the other. The Israel Lemichtav Muber, Israel Lemichtav Zera. You have to have 2 psukim over here. One to say she doesn't go back if she's pregnant, and one to say she doesn't go back if she has a child.
What is
Tika,
Elon?
Bezerah Einla. That's the pasuk. Bezerah Einla. It says
That's the pasuk?
the pasuk says that the Ubas Kohen Kisi Almana Busha Bezerah Einla.
Oh, I see. We need both.
You need both Kinureha to tell you not a muberis, and you need Bezerah Einla. Why? Because Bechman Bezerah Einla may Korachad Gufa Vasha Tre Gufe. if it only would say she doesn't go back if she has a child because before she was one body, now she's two bodies. I mean, she gave birth. So that's, the guy's really here, the kid's really here. So that's enough reason she shouldn't go back because she reproduced. You might think that if she's just pregnant, she's not so connected to that she can't go back to eat her father's house. Maybe she could. She just muberes. Maybe she could still eat truma. So you need the pasuk to say that even a muberes. So far, that she cannot go back even though she's muberes. If you don't say, this is what you're saying, that if you just know that a child holds her back from going back home, that doesn't mean that a pregnancy holds back from going back home. But now Gemara says the opposite story also. Because Bechmana muberes, the mekar gufa srika, hashta gufa malia. That the woman is different. A pregnant woman and an empty woman is different. Even though, so if we say she can't go back because she's pregnant, we'll say because she's not the same. She's not the same as she was before. Before she was an empty body, and now she's filled. She's filled with a over. But if she gave birth already, so that second body is not within her anymore. If she gave birth, maybe that's different. You might think that before she's going back to the same thing. She's the same. She was without a child in her, and she's still without a child in her. The child came out already. So you might think that she could go back. So you have to have both psukim. You wouldn't be able to learn one from the other. There's a svara lakan or lakan, so you don't know one is more chomer than the other, and therefore the pasuk have to say both. That she doesn't go back both if she's pregnant or if she gave birth. Could she go back home to eat truma from her father?
And now she's the same as she was before when she ate truma. So why is she?
Yeah, she has a child. Okay, the child. He's not going to eat truma. No,
Uh-huh.
he's the Israel. But
Uh-huh.
so the Gemara says you need both. Now the rest of the Gemara is going to do this as far as back and forth, back to the chart. If you need sukkim for everything, the first thing the Gemara seems is going to challenge.
And semen is semen.
The siman here is just a mnemonic. It's a mnemonic to remember the next Gemara.
What semen mean is the
Semen.
semen itself.
Right? No. It starts off with a siman, ends off with a siman, just like Parshas Balos, where it gives a siman before,
What
siman
siman,
after,
siman?
the two nunin,
Yeah, what
simaniyot.
does that mean?
So there's a mnemonic over here. It's a mnemonic to remember the next four Gemaras. If you look on if you zoom out, there are four questions.
Isn't it Summit?
No, that's just another way of saying like underline. When you have apostrophes, it's not, the word siman is not abbreviation.
Okay.
You have that a lot
Not
in
an
the,
acronym.
what does an acronym mean? Rashi tables. Right, it's not Rashi tables. Whenever it wants to underline something in the Gemara, so to speak, or the Rishonim also used to do that. They want to tell you, they just make apostrophes. They just write the two apostrophes just to,
But why did they put the chick? Why didn't they just say the word semen? That's what I don't understand. Why did-
okay, as you wish. You can take it out if you want, I think also. But the next Gemara is going to have four questions and four answers. The pink is the question, the blue is the answer. There's going to be psukim, the four psukim, and it's going to question the things on the chart. So if we go back to the chart, the first one is about Yibum, second one about Truma, as far as Mason Kachayim. So we're going to be focusing, where to go? Where is that chart? Here it is. This last row, we're going to talk about this. Who says this is true? The Gemara is going to say, if there's no pasuk, means we don't know there's a pasuk yet. I told you at the end of the story, there's a pasuk for each one, but we don't know that. So the Gemara is saying, who says this is true? The Gemara is going to ignore the middle column now. We're going to talk about the two outer columns. And the Gemara is going to talk about it. If you have this and this, and this, if you have these three informations, so the answer should be over here, also an X. If this is an X and this is a check, and this is an X,
That's
means
true,
even-
that would be-
then all you should be an X.
Yeah.
And the Gemara is going to bring a pasuk for this. Then the Gemara is going to talk about if you don't know this, if you don't have a pasuk for this, so then we would say if this is an X and this is a check, and this is a check, this is surely a check. And there's going to be a pasuk for that also. That's going to be the logic of the Gemara. Then we're going to go on to the first column and say who says this is true if you have this and that. That's going to be the focus of the pattern of the Gemara now. So the first thing the Gemara is going to ask, who says this is true? Who says that if the son died at the time that the son died at the time of the death of the husband by Yibum, he died with a child, and then he died. Subsequently, the child died. Maybe the mother has to do Yibum now because her husband didn't leave any children. That's the most question. Amalei Avidim Midiskar Talarova. Lo Nasa Mason Kachayim Yibum. By Yibum, if the child died,
So you're not reading the Simmons.
I'm not doing what?
Reading the Simmons.
No. I'm skipping. Amalei Avidim Midiskar Talarova. Lo Nasa Mason Kachayim Yibum. We can do it afterwards. After we finish, we can go back. Lo Nasa Mason Kachayim Yibum. We should not say that if the child's dead, he's considered a child for Yibum. Means if the child would die subsequently, then the mother should be Chayv in Yibum maybe. Question. Mikal v'chomer. You should make Kal v'chomer. Ma b'makom she'asaf vlad ben arishin k'vlad ben hasheni l'postam ben hatruma l'wasam mesim kachayim l'wasam mesim kachayim. Makom she'lo asa vlad ben arishin k'vlad ben hasheni l'postam ben Yibum. Ein odin she'lo nasa mesim kachayim. Shouldn't we make that Kal v'chomer? Shouldn't we make the Kal v'chomer and say that if by this is the case of Vlad ben Arishon, that Vlad ben Arishon by Yibum is not considered a Vlad, and by Truma it is. So over here, by Mace, that Truma is not, so by Yibum B'Shol should be not. So this child should not be considered a child. The more answers, here's the answer. How do you know that if the child died subsequently, the mother doesn't fall to Yibum? That the ways of the Torah are pleasant. And it can't be that when the husband died, she was allowed to marry out, and she married out. And then the child died of her first husband, and then she has to fall to Yibum or get chalitza. And then Rashi
She could
said,
have married before he died.
yeah,
And the ways are pleasant in that.
and that's not going to, what's not going to be pleasant? So Rashi says, of course, it's not going to be Yibum, but let there be chalitza. So it's not pleasant that the husband,
Maybe it was a Kohen.
The-
The new husband was a Kohen.
No, it has nothing to do
And then once she does Chalitza,
that also might be an issue.
with what.
If the husband will be a Kohen, if the second husband would be a Kohen, and now she's going to do chalitza,
Well, then he
so
can
maybe,
stay
and
married.
even if not, Rashi brings down, that's also, it'll be repulsive to the husband that his wife has to do chalitza to the brother of the previous husband, which makes like she's connected to him, and it was that like he had relations with her before the chalitza, that would be repulsive to him. That's not called pleasant, so it can't be a torment though.
So that's the
That's the
Talmud
answer.
Lomar and that.
That's the process. So
So
with that,
now we have a check.
that's why there's a check over there. That's the check. If you'd rather in the pasuk, we'd say, that's the proof of that. Now the Gemara goes on to this one, the next one, with Truma, who says that if he died, it's not considered a blood. I think that's what's going to be now. Let's see. That by Truma, we should say that even if the child died, she should not be allowed to go back.
So which box is this?
That's the bottom left.
Bottom left, okay.
That if the child died subsequently, she should not be allowed to go back to her father's house to eat Truma. Mikal v'chomer, ma bakum shelo asa vlad ben arishin k'vlad ben hasheni lepotra min hayibum asa mesim kachayim so makom she'asa vlad ben arishon k'vlad ben hasheni lepotra min hatruma and then shenasa mesim kachayim. That's going to be the kal v'chomer from again the minabala rishon from the previous marriage, that if you have 1, 2, 3, if you have these 3 boxes as givens, so there should have been that this is surely considered a vlad, right? If you have 1, 2, if you have these givens and also this given,
So then it should be.
so then this surely should be a vlad.
Yeah.
It says the criteria by Truma to go back to her father's house is if she doesn't have any children, and she doesn't have any children. The pasuk says that. Well, what is the criteria? The criteria is if she has children. So she doesn't have children, even though she had children, but now she doesn't have children. That's all the pasuk says. So the kal v'chomer doesn't take away from the pasuk. The pasuk says if she has no children, she can go back. So she has no children. She had children, but now she doesn't have any children, so she can go back. And she could eat truma from her father. The next question: that if this is now we're questioning this box, this top right. There we said that if a woman has a previous children from previous marriage, so it's not enough for yibum. But let's say we don't know that, and you have these givens. This is a given. This is a given, and this is a given. So we should say that if even by truma, which it's hard to be a child, here it's not a child, and here it is a child. So, but even this is a child, this surely should be a child. And the answer is That's the most question. Bikal v'chomer. Ma b'mokom sheh lo asa meisim kachayim le'inyan truma asa v'lad ben arishon kivlad ben hasheni. Mokom she'asa meisim kachayim le'inyan yibum ein den shenasa v'lad ben arishon kivlad ben hasheni. Tamad lomer bein ein lo. V'ha ein lo. The pasuk by Yibum says it depends if he has a child or not. That's what it says. Depends if he has a child. If he has no child, he's Yibum. He doesn't have a child, even if she has children. Well, bein ein lo, and v'ha ein lo. The pasuk is bein ein lo. That's the pasuk. That if he has no child, he goes. If he has no son, he has no child, so then there's Yibum, and he doesn't have. So it fits the criteria. The criteria the pasuk says if he has no children, so there's Yibum. And the last question is the bottom right. The bottom right is if this is not a given, if this wouldn't be a pasuk, so you have these three givens that as far as the child dying by Yibum, it is considered a child, but Truma it's not. And on previous child marriage, child of a previous marriage is not considered. So this surely should be not. If this is and this is not, and this is not, this is surely not. So the answer is going to be there's a pasuk for that also. By Truma, even if she has children from a previous marriage, she should be able to go back. She should be able to go back to Truma. That was the chart that we just showed. Again, the chart that if over here it is considered a child, and here it's not. So over here that it's not. Here surely it should not. It should not be considered a child. The fact that she has, this would be the case where she married two Israelis. So she married, she Bas Cohen, she married Israel, and she has a child, and she married another Israel and doesn't have a child. She should be allowed to go back to her father's home. Don't look at the previous marriages. So the answer is, Tamad Lomar Ein La. Here it says if she has a child. Well, Yeshla. It says she can go back if she has no children. But she does have children. Right. That's the end of the Gemara. We went through all the cases, so we found the pasuk for each one. The only one the Gemara didn't talk about is in the middle top. This the Gemara didn't discuss. Rashi brings it down. That we learn out that from that. So Ben Ein Lo, I know that Rashi brings down the pasuk for this one that the Gemara didn't discuss. The Siman, if you can figure it out. Amalei lo nase masa b'misa. I think the Gemara fixed it up a little bit. There's some mistake over here. Yibum Truma, Yibum Truma. All these questions, the order, the questions are going to be Yibum then Truma, Yibum then Truma. Lo nase. And then Nasa. I think I wrote it a little bit different. I think that they fixed up the similar a little bit. You have time for another parak?
Yeah.
Let's try to do the Mishnah. A woman whose husband went overseas, and they came and told her that her husband died. But we're going to see the Gemara that it means only a came, only one witness, not two witnesses. One witness came and said that her husband died. Is she allowed to get married with only one testimony of one aid? So the Mishnah is going to say, this is the Mishnah. And here it says that she got married, but then the husband came back. It's catastrophe.
That's happened too.
What?
Yeah, okay, it's a sad situation.
Right. So she's a married woman, and she married, and she had a relationship with somebody else. So we're going to have a
Here
whole.
it doesn't say she was allowed, it just says.
It just says she's right. It wasn't
did.
right. Right. It wasn't going to say she can't go back to the first husband either. We're going to really have a whole list of things that are in bad shape. And really, the Gemara is going to say, I think eventually, I didn't learn it now. I think the Gemara is going to say the reason why we permit her to marry with an Eid Echad, only one witness. She doesn't have two witnesses. So how could she get married? We only permit her to get married because we're going to make it so serious if it's wrong that we're going to trust her that she's going to investigate well. She's not going to just trust the Eid Echad. It's because together with the fact that she's also going to be very, very careful not to make a mistake, because if it's wrong,
This would be a double loss.
it'll be she's
The first husband and the second.
right,
husband.
and a lot of other things also.
So
are gonna happen.
mistakes here means they allow.
It doesn't. The word means that she got married, but it doesn't say. It doesn't the word
Doesn't say.
right? But it does. The Gemara is going to say that. I mean, they gave her permission to get married, but it wasn't Pashat. It wasn't to Eidim. But because the Bezdin themselves is relying on her, do a good job in investigating. If you feel that you can get married and you're sure about it that your husband is dead, so you can get married. But then if the husband comes back, you should know that it's a bad shape. Yeah, there's a whole list. The list is going to go on Very far. Till where? Till here. Oh, no, even further. Oh,
Lots of.
it goes till here. It goes till here.
Wow.
A whole list of, what is it called? It's throwing the book at her. This is like everything, a lot of times. And based on that, because we tell her this is what's gonna happen, so make sure you don't marry unless you're sure. So what's gonna be? She can't marry either one of them. She has to leave the first husband also. If she wants to remarry, she has to get from both of them, even the second one. Really, she's not married to the second one. Really, she's only married to the first one, but she needs to get from the second one also. She loses everything from both husbands. Now, ksuba and Paris means whatever they owe her because they had eaten her Paris. And mazonos, no, even if she borrowed money to get mazonos, she doesn't get reimbursed. Below, so if she has any kind of clothing that's left over from either one of the husbands, she doesn't get it back. Even if she took it, she has to give it back.
I'm sorry, what's below alzeh?
On either husband.
Oh, on either husband, yeah.
And if she has children from either one, they're mamzer. So of course, the second one for sure is mamzerim because she's a married woman to the first husband. So what? Balaot means worn out garments. Means whatever she has left of the garments that she brought into the marriage, she loses them.
What's being not love?
And if she had taken it, whatever she took from all these things, she has to give back. If she took any of these above things, she has to give it back.
Okay, and the mamzer is.
Neither husband. So of course, the ones of the second husband are surely not husband. It's she's married to the first husband. So if she had children from the second one, they're surely mamzer. But the ones from the first husband, of course, the ones that happened before the story are not mamzer. But if she continues to live with him, they're considered mamzer, even though she's really married to him. But we make she has to get. We're going to consider it mamzer if she goes back to the first husband. And if she dies, neither one of them are allowed to are considered relatives to be able to become tummy to her if they're kohanim and
We're talking about Zev are the children.
two husbands.
And if she dies,
So
they're
neither
not
of them
allowed to bury.
they're
They're
not
not allowed to get
tummy
tummy.
to her because they're not
They're not
considered a husband.
Yeah.
The second one surely not, even the first one.
even. the
The
first
laws there says usually a husband has rights over these points that if his wife finds something, the finding goes to the husband. Or if she earns, the earnings go to the husband. Or he has jurisdiction to nullify her vows. But neither one is considered the husband to do all that. All these cases.
What does it mean? What's a mitzvah?
She found $100.
They don't get it.
Right. Usually the husband gets it. Usually it goes to the husband. It's the
It won't
husband's
go to
money.
them.
It won't go to them because they're not considered husbands. All these things for is if
And
they did,
anything that she
earns
Mhm.
doesn't go to them. And also a person that they don't have jurisdiction to nullify her vows. They're not considered husbands.
That would be a good thing for them.
Okay, but it means that they're not considered husbands. They're not considered husbands.
Yeah, totally.
It means even if they're supposed to divorce, but even if they didn't divorce yet, also it's not considered husbands. Because that's partial
She's like a mamzer,
because she had relations with she's had
Well,
relations.
wouldn't the daughter be a mamzeris?
Anybody, that's true, but it's about her. She becomes possible if she's a Bas Yisrael, she's a Bas Yisrael. She's an Israeli. She's a Israelis. That's how we would say it.
Oh, she's a Israelis and she can now not marry.
A Kohen because she had relations with a man and she was a married woman.
She got
They had
divorced.
relations.
She's
She's
like
like a
divorced
zona.
twice.
Not divorced. She'd be divorced from both of them, but besides being divorced, even if she didn't get divorced, I mean, you think anyway she's possible because she's going to get divorced. She's also a zona. Maybe the more will ask these
They're calling
questions
it a zona
because she had relations with a man
while she was married.
while she was
So it's-
married.
uh-huh.
Well, Bas Levi, if she'd be a Bas Levi, again, we hold that mice anyone's allowed to eat, but I'm not sure. I didn't see the details yet, but here it says that she can't eat mice either. I'm not sure about the details about the halacha. Or Bas Kohen min truma. She also cannot eat truma anymore because why? She loses truma. Why is that?
It sounds like maybe kanas.
Maybe it's a kanas. Why can she not eat truma? Because
The regular law is only-
this was partial. No,
She should go
because
back to her father's house. but
because she
now-
was because she had a bia psula. She had a bia psula make that she can't eat truma. I forgot this halacha. I'm sorry. Even her yorshim, neither of their yorshim get her ksuba. What does that mean?
Children from either of the men. What does it
Don't
mean?
get her ksuba. What does her ksuba mean? That would mean
They
I
mean-
didn't see it well enough. I skipped. I didn't realize. I don't know what it means. We'll do it again tomorrow. They may-
Well, she doesn't
It
get.
doesn't say she doesn't get ksuba. It means that it's said already before she doesn't get ksuba. Instead of in ksuba, now it says that the yorshim don't get ksuba. Don't get her ksuba.
Maybe they don't. What would that mean?
she dies, then.
So Rashi says the Gemara is going to ask which ksuba. There is no ksuba. What is that's Gemara is going to ask? What does it mean ksuba? She doesn't have any ksuba. Okay, and then it says the imesu achiv shalzev achiv shalzev chosim lo b'yavin. If either one of the husbands died, so there's no yibum to her, but there is chalitza. Now that's
If they both died.
if either one of them died.
If either one of them died, any of the brothers will do chalitza, nobody will do yibum. That's the-
Right. Maybe you're saying it means both of them.
That's also.
So there's no yibum. We understand that they
It
get
seems
married.
like
They're not
she's the one
considered
that got
marriage.
remarried. Well, what does it have to do, like the first husband who went overseas?
So yeah, but we're not considering that. We're not considering them married. We're saying that we're taking away all of the positive points of them being married. So she's not going to be considered the wife of the second one, surely not. But we're going to say that's do chalitza, even though she's not really married to the second one. There is a chalitza, and to the first one, there's no yibum, even though she really is his wife. And he died. So why not do chalitza to her? We're going to stop the yibum only chalitza. Why not do yibum? We're going to start with yibum, but do chalitza. I'm just doing it very roughly. I didn't do it well. And then all this is Tanakama so far. Now there are some Tanaim that argue on certain points that we said. Rabbi Yossi Omer Ksubas Haliksi Ba'ala Rishon. Rabbi Yossi seems to say that she does get ksuba. That's what it seems to say. She does get ksuba. Tanakama said no ksuba. Rabbi Yossi argues on that point, says there is ksuba on the first husband, not for the second husband. Those three things that Tanakama said that the husband is not considered husband as far as these three zechuyot to get her findings, her earnings, and to nullify her vows. He says that the first one is considered husband of those things. Rab Shimon Omer, that the brothers of the first husband, it would be a yibum. Means the Tanakhama says no yibum, even from the first husband. But he says it could be. There could be bia from the first husband, yibum from the first husband's brothers. And it would, and if there's a co-wife, that's a good yibum. There is the yibum or chalitza is good enough. She's considered a wife as far as yibum and chalitza, and even if there's another co-wife, she's okay. She can go free because it was done yibum or chalitza to the one of the wives. So that's considered that there is yibum or chalitza, even yibum, according to Rabbi Shimon.
If she was a co-wife.
So and they did yibum or chalitza to her.
She was a co-wife.
Yes, so she's out, but chalitza to her. But I'm not sure if that would part her. Of course, smash a little bit that maybe it wouldn't part the co-wife.
There's no chalitza.
No, it says there is chalitza. Chalitza and no yibum. Before it said there is chalitza.
And no
yeah. And now he says that the yibum also would be part of the tzara. Here he says that even yibum would part of the tzara.
I see.
And the end of Lad Mamza Mimenu Mamza. Here he seems to argue on that and say that the kid's not going to be a Mamza from the first husband. So something I'm arguing on certain points that the Tanakhama said. All this was till now the case was that she got married with the testimony of one witness.
Did you do the Nisas Shalom?
No, now I'm doing that.
Okay.
But now, if she got married without a special permission of Bezdin, which the Gemara is going to say means she had two Eidim, it's very, I wouldn't see it in the words. But the whole Mishnah tell now meant she got married with permission of Bezdin. That meant that she only had one Eid, which wasn't the favorish. But now the Mishnah says if she got married without special permission, which means there were two Eidim, so then she's allowed to go back to the first husband because she had two Eidim. So she's almost an onus. She's an onus now. In the first case, she wasn't an onus because I only had one Eid. We said, make good investigation, we'll trust your investigation, but you know that you take a big risk. But in this case, we had two Eidim, so she had good testimony. And if the husband comes back, she's not to go back then. But this is how be Bezdin, but if she had to have Bezdin's permission, which means the case we said before about one Eid only, and the special permission of Bezdin to get married, then they'd say, like I said, then she has to get divorced. She doesn't have to bring a korban for the relation that she had. So I didn't see this yet. Rashi talks about Yachid Shasta Boraz Bezdin Pattern. Shalom Pi Bezdin. Elevating Chayevis korban the Shogegasi. Veins are honest. So here we're going to talk about that if the Bezdin made a mistake, she acted on Bezdin, then she doesn't bring a korban. But if she acted her own, she can't go back, right? But she, as far as the korban, Tuman korban because it was Bezdin's. But lo, this is helping Bezdin. But if she didn't need a Bezdin to get married,
which meant that she had 2 Eidim.
Right, they'd say, but Chayevis korban because she had relations with she's a married woman that had relations. It was a mistake. It was an onus even,
She being
but-
Cohen, but she didn't then go back.
and she couldn't go back to her first husband.
The power of the basement is stronger than the 280.
As far as the korban, that's going to be the thing about when the Bezdin makes a mistake. The pasuk talks about she did it al pi haras Bezdin, so then that's Maseches Horias. That I will see them more as we go, I guess. And then what else does the mission say? Yafakoch Bezdin shapotim min korban. Yeah, that's what it says. The Bezdin makes that she should put from the korban. Haru Bezdin linase b'achol kilkala hayeves b'korban shaloi tu elo linase. But if she Bezdin said that she could. Bezdin, in the case of 1-8 came, and Bezdin said she can get married if she investigates. That's called the psak of Bezdin. But instead of getting married, she just was mazana. And she
I'm sorry,
thought,
what words did you say?
Haruha Bezdin linase b'achol kilkala.
And she went.
And she went and she was kilkala. Kilkala is another way of saying that she was mazana.
On the Torah of the basement.
But Bezdin didn't tell her to be mazana. Bezdin said that you can get married because, of course, we are assuming that your husband died. But she said, so she was what?
This 1-8 said that he did. So
Right.
us Based-In are going to tell you.
You can get married if you investigate and you're convinced that your husband is dead, so you can
Go
get
ahead.
married. So she was a lamdanista. She
Yeah.
was lam, and she said if her husband died, so she took the opportunity to be mazan, not to get married. And she's a priya.
Oh,
She's
Kalkala means without getting
without married. Some she had relations with a man.
Oh, I
So
see.
that Bezdin didn't say she should do. So even though Bezdin is telling her that if you are convinced that husband's dead, you could get married, but she can't say I'm relying on Bezdin when she's mazan, and therefore she is going to be chayiv korban. The permission that Bezdin gave her was to get married, not to be mazan.
I see.
So even though it's all based on the same issue, is the husband alive or not? But- Korban chatas for having relations as a married woman.
I see.
Can she go back to the husband?
That's said before already.
And then it ends.
We'll do the Mishnah again. That's what I wanted to run
And then
through.
it ends that because they just allowed her in order for her to get married,
Right.
not for her. to-
Not the mazan.
Yes.
There she goes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay,
Parak is
well,
this?
what is that?
What number parak is this?
I think it's 10, up to Parak 10, is that 10? We're reading the third volume of, or whatever, the next volume of Archville. This is the last third, in the last third. Yes, go back, everybody. Thank you. We'll be back in 2 minutes with Tehillim.
Hello.